Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Gregor Götzl. I'm chair of the COST Action Geothermal-DHC, addressing the integration of geothermal energy in heating and cooling networks. And I would like to welcome you on behalf of the organizer of today's webinar, the EU project CROWDTHERMAL and the EU COST Action Geothermal-DHC, to our webinar on how to evaluate and take into account public perception in geothermal district heating and cooling projects. It is the first webinar of a series we are planning to have in the next months, where we talk about non-technological aspects of better integrating geothermal energy into the heating and cooling sector, respectively heating and cooling networks, which we see as a very important option for decarbonization of this sector as such. Our webinar today is addressing important aspects, important perspectives of co-creating public values and instruments, options for public engagement. For this purpose, we will have 3 talks today, representing first the EU project CROWDTHERMAL by Jan Hildebrandt. Jan has a psychological background, working at the ICS in Saarbrücken in Germany, and was engaged in psychological acceptance research. Our second speaker of today, Maja Zunschek, she's working at the University of Maribor. She's an expert in media and communication, and in the framework of the EU geothermal project GeoFood, she was investigating communication aspects of the acceptance of geothermal energy. Our final speaker of today, Joanna Ayrol from the French energy supplier Engie. She's doing her PhD also on new business models, on creating new values for heating and cooling networks, and she will speak about her work in our final talk today. But just before we dive into the presentations, we thought it would be good to have a short warm-up, short panel discussion with all our 3 speakers, and I just realized that all of them are here already. And I would like to invite now Jan, Maja, and Joanna to activate their videos. Yeah, I can see everybody. Hi. And start with our short introduction warm-up panel discussion. And I would like to ask the questions in the order of the presentation. So I will start with Jan. And I would like to ask you, in the context of your later talk, from the perspective of psychological acceptance research, is there one factor or critical factor that dominantly drives the acceptance towards geothermal energy? Would you please share your opinion with us?
Yeah, hi everybody, and thanks you, Gregor, for the nice introduction, and of course, thank you also for the question. I would say maybe it would be nice if there was only one factor explaining everything. Would be much more easier, maybe especially for the practitioners. But we see in our research that is not the case, so that we have many factors influencing the acceptance of geothermal. I think and of course we have different acceptance levels, let's say. So when we look at the level of social political discourses or more media coverage about geothermal, then I would say the risk perception connected to seismicity is one of the most salient factors. So in terms of it is visible, and the induced earthquakes and maybe then induced decreasement of property values. So this is one of a big discussion we do have, but I think it is important to stress that, of course, when it really comes to a project on local level, that we have many other factors which are relevant, and very important, I think, to stress in the context of acceptance research, it's not only about the factors influencing non-acceptance, but also we have many factors influeing acceptance in terms of supporting a technology. And this is, I think, what is also important to speak about public dialogue, about public involvement, community benefits. And so to shortly answer your question again, no, there's not that one factor, but it's complex interdependencies of different factors. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. May I ask you, from your experiences, how critical or how much influencing is the cultural background, so the different regions we see in Europe? So the values might also change between the regions, I assume, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It is, and we see that we have regional differences, but I think again it's not only the only factor, but the connection then to the project. So how benefits are shared, which if we have a region with many, for instance, collectivistic values, then it is important, or then it's especially important that there is the option for benefit sharing, for example, or that there is some regional value added is produced. And so again, it's I think it is important to understand that we are talking about the system, the project, and the local context and the cultural background. And the higher the match between those different components is, the more likely it is that it is accepted.
Thank you very much, Jan. Let's go forward to Maya. So your work is from a little bit a different angle. You're from media and communication perspective, and I would like to ask you, from your point of view, of a media and communication expert, what would be the key practical tips when communicating geothermal energy to the general public?
There are several key practical tips, but I would say that if you would have to start with the most important ones to also very important ones, would be first not to take public perception as for granted, but primarily to start as soon as possible to involve the main stakeholders, including also the general public, because usually the main problem is you have your project, you have it all visualized, and after all of that is finished, and then you go and you start communicating that. And primarily in the end, what can the result be is that the negative responses could be, why didn't we know about this earlier? Or why weren't we involved? So I think just the mindset usually needs to be completely different, and that is going from dissemination of your idea versus to really to communicate. So I would say that would be the first thing to think about: who do we have to communicate with, who do we want to communicate with, and why didn't we start it even earlier? So isn't now really the best, now is the time if we haven't started yet. So I think that would be the first really best advice. Other good advice is really to think about counter arguments. I'll be talking about results from Slovenia, but really listen what people's possible counter arguments may be, even if they don't have them yet. So what I'll be talking about is from Slovenia. The general perception of geothermal energy is very positive, but that means that in this space, all the negative arguments that can come will be heard for the first time, which means that you need to be the one to anticipate in advance what the counter arguments could be, so that they hear it preferably from you. So yes, we know these are the possible negative sides, or we know these are the possible risks, and we will manage them like that, so that you show that you already thought about them. And the third rule I would say is really think about your own credibility. To build it via storytelling, so that you're not represented only as an organization, like or depends on who you are, who's communicating, but really your personal values, who you are as a person, that you use the power of storytelling, and that people understand why are you in this, and that you really are able to show that it's not only the economic gains, but it's really the gains that will be for common good. So, and there are lots more of other advice, like really be good with visual communication, etc. But I think these three are really the main that you start with. So.
Thank you very much, Maya. I think you will show it in your presentation. It's also important to identify which are the critical arguments, because you don't know them all in the beginning, I assume.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thanks a lot. Let's move forward to Joanna. So you are more, let's say, as far as I understood, you're going in the practical realization. So how can it be then transposed in reality in offering services? That is, I think, part of your research and your work. And I would like to ask you about your experiences in your research. So have you seen a situation where geothermal project was jeopardized due to, let's say, misleading public perception?
So hi everyone, thank you for your question, Gregor. And I think I will start by agreeing with what Maya had just said. You never communicate soon enough. It's always too late. And one of the things I've learned when I was working at ENGIE is that actually a lot of problems in geothermal projects was because they didn't engage with the public, with the citizens soon enough. And so once the investments were made, once the work was starting, they were like, oh, but they are complaining about disturbances, they are complaining about noise, they are complaining about a lot of stuff, just normal stuff, but they didn't know that this stuff was happening. So they were not okay with this happening. So that's a first thing. And then also about the media, I think it was Jan who talked about, is to be prepared that there may be changes in the media, there may be an earthquake somewhere. And so to be prepared to react to that and to engage with the people you were doing the project with, to explain, okay, it's not the same technology, it's not the same risks, and what's happening there won't happen here. And if it happens, we have some process put in place. So really to anticipate what could go wrong in other places and what impact it can have in your projects. So yes, in projects, it happened that things are already, like the work is already starting and then the public are not okay. And it causes a lot of overcosts because you have then to adapt, but too late. So it causes a lot of overcosts to adapt late because you have to change maybe the technology, you have to change maybe your processes for your work, you have to change your time of work, you have to change a lot of things to adapt to your public. And there were projects at ENGIE where this happened and they had a big overcost that was hard to explain to the municipality where they didn't do earlier, you know. So definitely importance of public perception.
Thanks, Joanna. And just because I'm curious, so what was the strategy afterwards? When you see that you have this let's say, hurdles, how did they try to get the people on board, or maybe it will be part of your presentation, probably?
So there was first like a more organizational learning, so learning from their mistakes. So now they're trying to create some process on when to engage with whom and how to react to such things to avoid this kind of problems. And when this arrived on one project in France, the first things they did, it was to really gain back the support from the municipality. So had a lot of discussion with the municipality, and then the municipality can also bring back the people in the projects, you know. So it was really this key actor to bring back.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Joanna. Okay, so I think we can close our warm-up panel discussion. And for all our listeners, two important things. First of all, this meeting will be recorded. It will be available on YouTube. You will get a notification. And as far as I know, you will also have access to the presentation as PDFs later on. So you can rewatch, reassess all the material after our today's webinar. The second thing is, if you would like to ask questions to our speakers, we will have a final question and answer round at the end of this webinar. Please use our Q&A function. It should be easily identifiable. If you don't find it, of course, you might use the chat, but Q&A function would be preferred. Okay, let's start with our presentations. And the first speaker will be Jan Hildebrand from ICES. The topic of his talk will be Evaluation Protocol for Planning and Monitoring of Geothermal Projects. Jan, the floor is yours, and I'm looking forward for your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to share some results on some insights from the work we done over the last years in the CROWDTHERMAL project. And yeah, before maybe going into the details of the protocol for planning and monitoring of geothermal projects, I would like to reflect together a bit some of the background of our work and how it's a bit what we already discussed in the short warm-up we just had, that we reflect that it's not only the technology, but every new infrastructure. In fact, also this counts also for streets and motorway for sure. But of course, now in the more decentralized energy transition, we're talking about the high deployment, high numbers of new energy infrastructures. All of them mean a significant change for our everyday or daily life environments. So they change is not only the energy landscape, but also the landscapes on local level. And of course, they are not only as a technical system, not only or can not only be seen purely technical, but they are in a social technical system understanding. They are connected to other environments, of course ecological, but also social and cultural environments. And Gregor asked in the warm-up already about maybe cultural differences between different regions or countries. And I think this is the main point to understand that each technology is embedded in a social system, and we have to understand the whole system and the interdependencies between the different components, not only looking at only one part of the technology, for example. And for the challenges of the ongoing energy transition, I think for whole Europe, we can say it is crucial to understand which are the main factors driving social acceptability and how we can reach putting everything together sustainable solutions. And in this context, I think it is important to reflect two main points. I would like first dive in shortly in the participation research, and then afterwards in acceptance research. It is important to reflect how projects are going on, and that we have participation, or that we have a planning and a permitting. We have planning and permitting procedures requiring public participation. And in many cases, it is the first time that people get in contact with the technology, but also with their connected stakeholders, like the developer, for example. And of course, with all the different topics which might be relevant. And in this case, it is exactly that happening, what we just discussed briefly, that people getting information, people talking or searching for something, giving them the background and the basis for making for their own opinion building, but also to make maybe some decisions, and which might lead to acceptance or non-acceptance. And you can see here a quite easy or simplified figure of different factors influencing the acceptance of energy infrastructures, in this case geothermal energy. And you can see that risk perception and seismicity and other local emissions, especially during the implementation or the building phase, are relevant, but we can also see that there are many different or many other influencing factors. And it is important to see, I think, this participation procedures and the whole planning and permitting context, not only as an exercise which one have to do, but as a window of opportunity. So when we get into contact with the local people, it is the chance to gain local knowledge, to understand better the local context, the biography. Maybe they have valuable experiences with other energy infrastructure projects you can benefit from. You can get people maybe due to participation more active in the planning process and get them on board we talked about also other forms of participation or of local benefit, for instance, due to financial participation, so you can get them financially involved. And again, see it on a different system level. It's not only the single project, but actually in the sum of all renewable projects are the core of energy transition. So each, let's say, well-planned and each project with a good conducted participation helps to build trust in the whole planning and approval processes and in the process of energy transition. So the idea here is what I would like to transport. The participation is not only a single step, but it is about a whole process, and it takes time, and many of the relevant factors, the relevant topics are discussed in this frame. So it is worth to spend some attention on the participation procedures and involvement strategies. That's one point. And second, regarding the acceptance, research shows that acceptance is not a stable construct or a one-shot measurement, but we can see that as a dynamic variable which might change over time, depending on different influencing factors, and of course, again, connected to what I just showed on the slide before, on what people learn about the project or the degree of knowledge they have, or maybe on new information they receive. So here you can see a U-curve, it is called. It is from the field of wind energy, but I think it can be transferred also to other energy infrastructures, that we have a rather high acceptance before announcing a project, and when it comes into, when it's getting concrete and then it comes to implementation, the acceptance decreases. And here in this time, all these discussions, discourses, maybe conflicts occur. Negative impacts are feared and discussed, and which you can only show when you do longitudinal studies. The curve goes up again over time after construction when the projects are in operation. And we have different explanations for that phenomenon, that on the one hand, maybe some of the expected negative impacts just did not happen like that, the way that they were feared. And the other thing, that maybe other positive impacts that weren't expected, they occur and get visible, how a community benefits from the project. So that after construction, the acceptance is high again. We see in several different polls, especially for the case of Germany, that people with experience of renewable energies in their neighborhood have a higher acceptance that compared to people who have not the experience with the respective renewable energy projects which were polled or asked in the surveys. So this strengthens this result shown here, that the contact and the experience have a positive impact. But which is quite important, I think Joanna said it in the beginning, you can't take it for granted. That is an automatic way. So you don't, this would be the wrong lessons learned from this curve, that you just sit and wait till the acceptance goes up again. But of course, they have some actions to be taken. And the second thing is, of course, you have always the risk in the valley of the U that the project completely gets jeopardized and stopped. So there's some work to be done. And as I showed before, participation and involvement strategies might be one way to go. In the CROWDTHERMAL project, we pulled this together and tried to take the lessons learned on the knowledge and results from participation research and also from acceptance research, and followed the approach from a social license to operate, SLO. And the approach here goes beyond the typical approaches of let's say only participation or acceptance factors, but try to combine those different approaches, building up a comprehensive and holistic approach, also including the dynamics and process-oriented ways of this approach. And the idea is a bit like social license to operate compared to a legal license that which you gain after a planning and permitting process and a positive approval. That you have to do actually the same also for the social level. And fulfilling some criteria for the procedural level, for example, transparency. We heard about already about the early involvement, about the early information, continuous information, and we worked together with the colleagues in the CROWDTHERMAL project on this conceptual framework. I won't go now not in every detail of this of this model. There's a publication at the end of last year, and it's open access. So if you're interested, the leading author is Amel Barich, a colleague from Icelandic Institute Georg and the CROWDTHERMAL project. So I'm happy to invite you to read the whole paper. But you can see that we have different factors integrated, different values levels. That you can see that acceptance and participation play a crucial role, but the whole project or the whole approach, goes beyond only beyond this acceptance perspective. And you see when you look at the middle of the model and the stages of approval and co-ownership, that at the end, the social license approach is really about building a bond between the project, which means the technology, but also the developer and operator, and the community and the people living there. So that's a kind of an identification. There's a trustworthy relationship between the community and the company, and the technology is well integrated in the overall system. And I think it's a quite interesting framework. But at the end, at this stage, it stays like it is a framework. And what we decided in the CROWDTHERMAL project was then to do the next step and to go into the measurement and validation of this model, that we say, okay, we could only draw really conclusions if we know more about the interdependencies of those different factors. And how do we know? The way would be is to measure, let's say to shape and create indicators. We constructed a protocol, which is at this stage a questionnaire, a standardized questionnaire containing around about 70 items, where it differs a bit as we have different versions depending on the state of the project, which means when we want to address projects which are in a quite early stage and at the beginning of the planning, we need to ask slightly different from projects that are already further in the planning or maybe already in operation. You can see that we ask a lot of questions to different things, like some are more personal related, which means the attitude towards energy transition in general, renewable energies, but also geothermal and special associations with geothermal and knowledge, perceived costs and risks or perceived costs and benefits. Quite important stages in this overall framework is the question of justice perception on the levels of procedural justice, which is about the process or the fair process, and distributional justice, which is about the fair distribution of costs and benefits, trust and credibility, the relationship to the developer or operator. And I think what is really important, and this is quite connected also to the social capital approach from Bourdieu, when we look about also impacts on the community beyond only economical figures, but also how this project supports social cohesion, or to which extent we can measure and document identification with the project, in terms of kind of a emotional bond with the project, or how it to which extent it is integrated in the local identity. And the idea is then, of course, regarding the measurement of those different factors, in the first step to assess which is the current state. But if you think about it as a planning instrument, you can use it to sensitize for the local needs, to learn about local needs and expectations to your project, regarding your project. So you can use it in a very early stage of the planning to better understand the local system. In the further process, you can even use it as a participation instrument. So you can discuss the results together with the local people. And of course, to adapt accordingly the project characteristics, or maybe also the communication. And in the longer run, from the more holistic perspective, it's a monitoring tool so that you can use it on a regular basis. So you can see the changes, and you see how people, but also how the whole project, how maybe different or single factors develop over time, and which gives you an empirical base for adapting activities or respond to certain developments, or maybe also to anticipate points of conflict, and to which is again the link to use it as a participation instrument based on that you can work better together with people. And yeah, on the right side you see some illustrations from, but it's more a simplified illustration just to get an idea. When you think about not only 2-point measurements in time, but if you think about over years, getting in place such a protocol, let's say 6 or 7 times, then you have really a nice timeline and see the development. And here, this is, you know, when you work in geothermal, you know those different project phases. And this is what we thought and where we worked on the CROWDTHERMAL project. The idea behind that, we have those different phases, and we have the different participation levels. And the idea is to understand that we have a process where we do have continuously work in regarding where we have to apply continuously apply participative measures connected, of course, to communication, where we, I think, here in the next presentation, some more details on. And these are only some examples what you can do some examples for participation measures you can do during the different phases. But of course, the choice of the specific participation measurement will be dependent from the local characteristics, from the stakeholders you have, from the social system, from the needs and concerns you learn about when you talk to the people, when you listen to the people, and of course, when you use some tools like the protocol. So here, the idea would be maybe to use the protocol in every phase, so you have that you have a real monitoring result at the end. So I would like to conclude, and I hope I stick to the time, that we see, and through our work in CROWDTHERMAL, but of course also in other projects where we address the social acceptance and participation measures of decentralized renewable energy projects, that we see it as a challenge. Of course, it is difficult. There's not the one-size-fits-all solution, but on the other hand, we see that is, of course, a big potential to be a solution in energy transition. So we need knowledge about acceptance and participation. We think that SLO provides a promising framework, and so I think it's a good approach to really dive deeper into the understanding of the different interdependencies in the whole complex topic. And we think tools like the protocol for a continuous measurement are really valuable to learn how the factors interact together over time, and then we can really see the changes and the development over time in a municipality or in connected to a geothermal project. And about continuation, I just want to say my last slide here that we just launched from the CROWDTHERMAL project a beta version of the core services. So, and the idea is, in terms of continuation, to offer services also beyond the CROWDTHERMAL project. So the CROWDTHERMAL project will end at the end of this year, but the core services shall be available also in the future. And you can see on the right side some of the main services, the topics, and also the target groups. And we are happy if you have a look on the CROWDTHERMAL website on those core services. And we are even happier if you also use the survey to give us some feedback on the services, how beneficial you perceive them, and what your thoughts on those services are, and maybe which other services you may need and find helpful. So have a look there. I think it's valuable. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jan. You perfectly stick into our schedule on the minute, I have to say. Thanks very much for your very interesting presentation. Once again, I invite all participants to pose your questions to Jan in the Q&A box. I see that already the first questions came in, and we're happy to take these questions later on. In the meantime, I would like to invite Maja Turnček to give her presentation with the title Presentation of the Results from the GeoFood Public Perception Survey. So Maja, the floor is yours. I'm looking forward for your presentation.
Hello from my side. I will be talking from about the GeoFood project. The project has finished, so it's going to be primarily the results of the project. So the content of my presentation is divided in 3 sections. The first is just the introduction, the research context of the project. Then I will be talking about the results of the survey that we did that's related to this public perception of geothermal energy. And then I will compare these results to other similar research that I could find out there in the world published. So from the research context, I think it's important that I first talk a bit about myself, because it's quite an interesting mix. Let's say mix of everything in terms of where I come from. So my background is in media and communication. So today I will be talking primarily from this perspective. But within GeoFood project, I also talked from the field of food production, because for a while I was very much involved in aquaponics food production. And now I talk from the perspective of Faculty of Tourism. So I come from University of Maribor. I'm the Vice Dean for Research at the Faculty of Tourism. And my interests cover very much the field of communication, food production, tourism, and in there, everything connected, I see climate change. So, and this very diverse perspective, this is what I will be talking about today. So GeoFood project was financed by the Geothermal project and from the European Commission, and then also from the national partners, the Research Council in Iceland, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, and the 2 ministries in Slovenia of Infrastructure and Environmental and Spatial Planning. The partners are from Iceland, the Netherlands, and Slovenia. So we cover both the university field and the SME field, and also the municipality in Slovenia, Občina Brežice. And here I would like to just pause for a while, because one of the questions in the question and answer was how to connect with organizations from the field of district heating. So Amerland, the Green Innovator, is one of the partners that is already using geothermal energy for district heating, starting with the 4 greenhouse production, but also then extending to the area around it. Also for example, a pool, the housing around it. So definitely, if the person that contact me about that, I can connect you to them. So aim of the GeoFood project was primarily to discuss or to research innovative concepts of how to combine geothermal heat infrastructure and circular food production, with the primary focus on aquaponic production. And one of the focuses was to construct RAS facilities, so to produce both fish and vegetables in a greenhouse, and then to compare the needs for the energy needs when you're using first the greenhouse production, and then the excess heat for this, how could be used for then RAS fish production. And this would be the models that came out done by the Wageningen University and research partner. So, okay, these are the models, but then at the end of the GeoFood project, one of the outputs were also a feasibility study of how to use this for our own local municipality. So, Općina Brežice that I mentioned before, but also the question of how to add value to this kind of geothermal production sites. And this is where the fact that I am now in the Faculty of Tourism comes in. Because one of the outputs was also analysis of good practice examples of geothermal food production and how they are using tourism and education, so and experience design to make the connection between food production and geothermal energy more visible to the general public. And one of the outcomes here was one of the models was taking this very basic model on experience design and analyzing how and whether the geofood producers go from this from the models of extracting just commodities, selling tomatoes, and then finding extra ways of adding value to make goods or to deliver services, or then to stage experiences. So in the case, this would be from Iceland, where you actually have a restaurant within the and a bar within the greenhouses themselves. But related to this, what we're interested in is, this is where we come to today's presentation, the public perception. We did a survey amongst the Slovenian population, which focused on the role of tourism in promoting the geothermal energy. So our question, primarily the question was, what is the perception of geothermal energy, and whether and in what cases people are interested in tourism products related to this. And so what we focused on is, if we talk about public support for renewables, we're focusing on this area of community acceptance, so the general public. And the sample was 362. So these were the people that answered also to the demographic questions. Generally, so most of them were in between their 30s and the 40s. Most of them were female, and this undergraduate, so higher education was the most important education. And what we asked them, sorry, this isn't translated yet, but primarily we asked them questions like, what is your first association with geothermal energy, and also with hydropower plants, so hydro energy. And in this case, I'm presenting just the geothermal part. And primarily what we discovered was that in Slovenia, because we have a very strong spa industry, so geothermal energy is directly connected to people's idea of wellness and spa. So for example, geyser and water, natural. So this is the area in Slovenia, Prekmurje, where we have a lot of wellness areas. Iceland is also a very common association. And what we see is through these three associations is that the perception of geothermal energy at the moment is very positive. So none of the associations were negative. So if I would show the pictures of hydro energy, there the negative associations were much more common. For example, that it's ruining the biodiversity, etc. And when we ask people about the general attitude towards geothermal energy, the general attitude is quite high. So clean, safe, effective, just reliable was a bit lower. But if we compare this to other types of energy, so in terms of effective, we see geothermal energy, nuclear energy, and hydro energy. These were the three types that we asked because our area is mostly based on this. So the area of our local municipality and then this eastern part of Slovenia. And what we see is in terms of effectiveness, nuclear energy is perceived as the most effective, but in terms of how clean it is, it's geothermal energy, just scoring the day. And the same with safe, again, geothermal is perceived as the best option and reliable much more than nuclear energy and hydro energy. When we ask them also through more detailed questions, like geothermal energy means a reduction of emissions and green energy transition. Again, very positive response, holds the key to our brighter high-tech future, positive answers. So these are from the most to the least. States can generate electricity with a better return of investment, and then geothermal energy creates new jobs and adds millions to our economy. So because it's millions, I guess it was over. That's why it's so low, because when you're in Slovenia, we're talking about millions, it just sounds very, very high. And then interest in industrial energy tourism. So what we analyzed was whether people would be interested in going to see these tourism products that are aimed at presenting geothermal energy. So the most interest would be into visiting a geothermal well than visiting a thermal spa, or geothermal food production in greenhouses. We see mean is 4.1. Educational visitor centers are less interesting to people. So what the primary interest is to see how geothermal energy is used right there. So the industrial type of tourism. While with the educational visitor centers and educational trails, it's a bit less because it's already perceived, okay, that's a tourism product. And the least interest would be in a power plant tour. So 3.55. And the difference why is because the geothermal well is already when you're in the spa, and food production is something that people are more interested in versus just visiting a power plant. And these are the main results that we presented. So other results is also in the paper itself. It's publicly available. But I wanted to stop here and discuss our results with other similar research done around the world. So Zaunbrecher and et al. They've asked people about their perception of geothermal energy, doing similar what we did, asking about associations, and yes, and the results are very similar to ours. So it's energy, it's heating, and it's terrestrial, and these were also in Slovenian case. What we don't see so much is the connection to tourism itself. So for Slovenia, what we can argue is that the tourism is the most important industry when we're discussing the public perception of geothermal energy. So the role of the tourism industry here, their responsibility is much higher than they're generally aware of. So they are the ambassadors of geothermal energy, and what our role in the future will be is to discuss much more on that and really to push them further to realize that they are the ones that can do the most in Slovenia. And the focus is in Slovenia because that is our context about the geothermal energy. So again, this is the German perception, again, terrestrial heat, drilling, electricity, etc. And then we also come to this negative sides. As I said, in Slovenia, none of the associations was negative. But in Germany, one of them would be already that it's very expensive. So earthquake, drilling, and drilling by itself is not something highly positively perceived. So and then not enough transparency, seismic explorations, odor nuisance, etc. So these are all the negative associations that, in this case, from the German public had, while Slovenia didn't have because they didn't have any exposure yet. So the time, we already heard this today, the time sequence is highly important when we're discussing public perception. What I find very original in this research is they've asked also people to draw their associations, and then they've analyzed these associations in this very different areas. So whether what they drew, whether it was power station, a house, or signal technical element, drilling, circulation, and these were the most typical things that people drew, or just some generic perspective, like in this case, that we could see how the process goes. And then they analyze whether that would be, whether there's any emotional evaluation in this. And if you're doing public perception, I think that's also highly advisable way to approach, but it does take more time and more effort. While on the other hand, it provides you with this more primary ideas, even more the primary associations and the knowledge that people have about geothermal energy. And especially in Germany, I think we're going to hear more about this today. So in Germany, there are a couple of cases where citizen initiatives were done against geothermal projects. So again, it depends on the geothermal projects themselves. For Slovenia, what I can say at the moment is primarily we have geothermal energy used, so the deep geothermal energy used for spas, so the tourism, for in one case also district heating in connection to a spa, and for food production. So these are the main types, and all of them are positively regarded. No proper negative response yet. Another research that I do think it's very good to analyze is the case from Pellizzone et al., where they've approached geothermal energy from this perspective of deliberative democracy, really doing discussions with the public, and really trying to involve them much more than just with the surveys we did. So for us, it was just the development of ideas for future tourism products. But in this case, they've asked people more in depth, and they provided them also with answers and with additional knowledge. And what they've discovered is that geothermal energy is on the fourth position in terms of, for example, in comparison to other types of energy, solar, wind, and biotechnologies in that case. And the very important question here was, how much do they trust their sources? So especially nowadays, we hear that science is having less and less of an impact. But also in this case, we still see that universities and research councils are perceived as the most objective sources to when we're discussing your project. So it's highly important to have also universities and research councils on board. But then what we see is national government is then much lower, 14% for very much. Journalists and media even lower, local governments even lower, energy companies even lower, NGOs quite low, and European Union quite low. This is not general. This is for this Italian case. It would probably differ very much, not only from country to country, but to region to region. So in Slovenia, I would guess that NGOs and journalists and media would be higher than national government, for example. And if we come again to counter arguments, so what would you be worried about the construction of a geothermal power central because of infrastructure impacts, landscape impact, gas vapor and other material emissions, microseismic risks, private speculation, hazard of for aquifers, and lacking transparency? Why I'm showing these cases from Italy, again, in Slovenia, not much discussion on this, so not much awareness and not much negative counter arguments. But that means that the Slovenian case is, especially the area what we saw, if we saw what Jan presented before, this graph going like this, The reason is when at the moment geothermal energy is highly positively perceived because it's connected to tourism, to the spas, so you have the direct connection to this warm, clean water. Also in the case of Slovenia, you can, yeah, in most cases you can also drink that water. So that's the direct association. But that means that as soon as we have this first media reaction, like very general media reports on negative effects, these people that have this very general public perception will be for the first time actually hearing about the negative, positive, negative arguments against geothermal energy. And that means that they're even more vulnerable. So even though it looks like, okay, the geothermal energy looks great, is very positively perceived, but if people never heard counter arguments, those counter arguments will have a proper and very, very strong weight. So for example, for people that have never heard somebody negating climate change, and if that's for the first time a new information for them, you're even more vulnerable than if you've heard the counter arguments against that. So that's why I'm showing also the results from Italy in this case. And on which argument would you have more information? So again, this shows, and we've heard this today, microseismic risks were perceived as this is the risk that is in the perception of the general public the most salient. So also others, but microseismic risks do really stand out in comparison to all other risks. And if we just, how am I with time, Gregor?
A little bit over time, but 5 minutes, 4 minutes is absolutely fine.
Just slowly, then just a bit from Australia. They did this similar research quite a while ago, more than 10 years ago, but they did it in temporal sequences. And what we could see is that the public image then grew. And that really depends on what the media reports were also and what the projects were. And also what I wanted to say is not all geothermal projects, of course, are the same. We've heard this today. So very much on the Australia case, the issue was water usage because of the different technology there. But again, seismic activity is one of the main fears. And what they did here also is they've analyzed how geothermal energy is reported in the media and who are the actors that get a voice heard in the newspaper. And this is both the industry itself and the federal government, scientists much less, versus what we said before is people trust scientists, so the research organizations more than one and the other. But general public much less, and community even less, etc. And then they also talked about whether they discussed risks, benefits, and risks. So in one case, it's only benefits only versus risks only. What, from the communication point of view, the best is to discuss both. So the worst is if you just discuss how great something is and you do not acknowledge there are also counter arguments and both the other side. So these two versions are really not the way to go, but primarily both benefits and risks, this would be the best option how to communicate on geothermal energy. Okay, but also just to stop on what we heard already today, the dynamic nature of the public image, how this changes through time and how important it is to follow it through the time. And this would be the case study from Chile, how in some cases they never changed their mind, but nearby residents associations, there were no data, but they were highly positive, medium, and again then positive. So in line with what we heard today, the line of it. And what that depends on was really the context, what are the energy projects, what was the engagement process, how much did they try to involve the public, and the project activities themselves. So what did the company or the organization do around it? And for further communication on this, I'm very much available also on my email. I know there was a question about this, about the connecting to a GeoFood partner. So this is my email, and yeah, open to further discussion.
Thank you very much, Maya. So I saw some questions came in. We will pick them up at the end of our webinar. As we are slightly behind our schedule, but it's not so critical, I would directly move forward to our final speaker of today. So Joanna Airo will speak about her PhD project, collective action to support the development of sustainable district heating with the focus on collaborative business models and co-creation.
Okay, so today we'll be talking about collective action, like why we're talking about collective action and how it can support the development of sustainable district heating. And I'll try to do some links with geothermal, but I think it's more global to all types of sustainable district heating. So what I'll be talking today is first, like why talking about co-creation and collaboration when talking about such systems, then what I mean by co-creation and why it can be used, how it can be instrumented, and more can, not directly operational, but more through towards operational stuff. And then the links with public perception to kind of make a loop with the subject of today's webinar. So let's start with co-creation and sustainable district heating. So here is an image I guess you all know. It's like all the different generations of district heating. And allegedly, when you're going for like 4th generation or even 5th generation, you're going to more sustainable type of district heatings. And this is the way it has been mainly tackled by a lot of people in the district heating world, like a shift from one technical system to another. So a technical system which will have a lower supply temperature, which will integrate new type of energy resources, so decentralized heat, waste heat from industries, heat pumps, all different type of stuff. So mainly seen as a technical system. And what's happening is that it's not only technical. This is an overview of a result from a previous webinar we've done. This was kind of a workshop with people from the COST Action Geothermal-DHC. And they were trying to map all the stakeholders of these last generation district heating systems. And there are a lot of them, like a lot of, it's kind of messy. There are many people involved or that could be involved or that we feel they could be interesting, but we don't know how to involve them exactly. So a lot of that stuff is happening. And by going for more sustainable district heating, for more decentralized district heating, we are also going for more complex stakeholders network, for more actors involved in the systems. So that's why it's not only a technical system, but it's also a collaborative and a collective system. And all these different stakeholders you see here, so they were more or less categorized. So each color is a category. So you have the municipality, the financial people, the kind of building owners, the suppliers, the operators, all these different type of people. And one important stakeholder was the citizens in general, who are above the whole picture and who are not connected to any other stakeholders because they are important, but don't really know how to tackle them, how to integrate them into the networks. And that is something co-creation tries to answer, because co-creation is like creating not only within the project partners, but with also other type of partners, for instance, citizens in general. And so, like I was saying, you have this new type of district heating that are more sustainable, that are decentralized, that have a lot of different energies inside it, and that bring together, that gather a lot of different stakeholders. And that comes with, of course, opportunities, but also with challenges. So this image is also a screenshot from the previous workshop I was talking about. And the people in the workshop were trying to assess sustainable, like low temperature geothermal district heating systems, district heating and cooling systems actually. And for different type of issues, so legal and contractual issues, multi-stakeholder integration, environmental issues, economic issues, they were trying to state what was an opportunity and what was more a threat or a challenge. And what we can see is that district heating, this type of systems, we think they could be of a lot of benefit to attain our objectives in terms of increasing renewable energy supply, the share of renewable energy in the system, in other systems, to reach the decarbonization challenge. So they are an important lever, they are an important mean to reach different political issues right now, different crises. And there are also opportunities in like economy of scale, in the environmental stuff also, like these systems will produce less emissions, it will be more environmental friendly, it could have a lot of co-benefits that could be interesting for the environment also. So a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of challenges. Those are more the red and yellow, orange boxes. And especially one category where there were a lot of challenges was social context, multi-stakeholder integration, and social acceptance. And this category can really be a threat to the project. So it's not only like some challenges that we have like that, but that don't really impact the projects. It has a real impact on the operational projects. So it can be barriers to the project creation because you don't find the right partners because they're not interested, because they don't know about the system, so lack of awareness. It can be barriers to the project development because of the public perception. We've already talked about that, because no one will connect to the system once the system is developed. So all this social acceptance, public perception, multi-stakeholder integration can really threaten the projects and can really be barriers to actually do the project. And it raises a lot of questions like how to secure interest of the different stakeholders to the network, how to share the risks between all the partners, how to share the benefits, also the investments, like how to share everything between the different partners and who are the partners. And one thing that can help is co-creation. So let me move into co-creation. So here I've just tried to, because co-creation was like in public administration literature, there's a lot of literature about how the public leaders can co-create with the citizens and also with private partners and do kind of a gathering of stakeholders to co-create. And I try to apply this to a project like a district heating project, which have the planning, the preparation, the procurement, and the operation, and what you can do at each step of this project life cycle. So for the planning, there is this idea of co-designing the roadmap. So thinking with the different people, so public authorities, citizens, consulting firms, what do we want? How you can project the citizens into the future project? Then there is the preparation, when you have to find the right partners who can help you co-create, and you co-create the desired answer. So you have this idea of, I want to do a project of sustainable district heating with a lot of local and renewable energies. And then what is the technical solution that you actually can do with which partners? So here you have the public authority, consulting firms, industrial partners, investors, new partners coming in. Then you have the procurement, where you actually do the contract between these different partners. So co-create the right type of contract, and you can share the risks. And it's not only one partner taking all the risks, but it's all the partners agreeing on the risks and agreeing on the share of the risk. Because if it's only one taking all the risks, it never works, because no one wants to take all the risks for such long investments and such risky investments, especially as the future is such uncertain, with crisis coming, with new technologies coming. So a lot of uncertainty coming here, making it necessary to share the risks, share the investments, define the right KPIs you will be assessing during the whole project. And here again, new stakeholders will come in, so public authority, consulting firms, industrial partners, investors, but also the operators, also the suppliers, also the consumers can come in. And finally, during the operation, like you have, of course, to co-assess the project, to collectively build some kind of expertise. And here again, you can have more partners, and you can involve all the citizens also to reflect on this project. And can it expand to the rest of the city? Does it have some co-benefits to other parts of the cities? Does it have some negative impacts you didn't take into account? So we try to be as collective as possible. And then this plan is, of course, supported by instruments, because you don't just go co-creating only through discussions. At some point, you have to be more concrete in that. And first, I will talk about an early co-creation process, which was the SAK Energy Challenge. And what has been done here was to really, for this early stage of the project, where they were just defining what could be a project, they tried to make an open discussions with different city representatives, industrials, ministries, but also to have interactions between the contestants. So here it was a kind of a boot camp workshop where all people were gathered together in the same place. And I think place is quite important here. And they were having a lot of open discussions with people you can't access that easily in normal times. Then for the bidding process, I think the example of the city of Canada, the government of Canada and the city of Ottawa, which were trying to be more co-creative in the bidding process and in the procurement process. And what they've done here was really to create a new type of contract. And to do that, they make a really long preparation phase with a lot of knowledge sharing, going to different places, trying to understand what were the best practices in different places. Then for the bidding process itself, they put some long time of competitive dialogue where you can discuss the KPIs, where you can discuss the proposed solutions, where you could discuss the sharing of the investments. So there was really a lot of dialogue during the competitive process. And then what they've done in the contract was to agree on objectives, but to make kind of an open board on the means. So they agreed that they were going into a partnership together. They agreed on what was their final vision, the district heating, but the road to go there was completely to be co-discussed during the life of the project. So really an open contract where you secure the partnership, you secure the long-term partnership, but you leave a lot of flexibility inside to do things actually. And the last one is really this idea of contract to secure the partnership, which is also done in Dunkirk and the Greater Copenhagen. First one is contract to secure the waste heat supply to the district heating, which is always difficult to work with industrials to secure some heat supply from industrials. And there they made some contracts going from the waste heat supplier to the municipality, and then from the municipality to the operator, so that it's not industrials with industrials doing the partnership, but with the municipalities acting as a kind of facilitator for the exchanges. And the last one is in Copenhagen, where they have a lot of different stakeholders, transmission companies, distribution companies, consumers, municipalities, and they all came together with a lot of different sharing contracts. They say, okay, heat is like our common resource. There were a lot of heat created in territory, it's common, and then we just agree on how we share it. And from this sharing, then they made the sharing of the investments, of the responsibilities, etc. So it's another way of thinking about the district heating system. So this, what like the main thing I want you to take out of it is that this co-creation is collective and is supported by a lot of different instruments to help foster this co-creation and secure this co-creation. And I will just do a short conclusion with public perception. So like why co-creation is important for public perception. First, it helps to integrate the citizens early, to understand their expectations, their concerns, and throughout the project to assess if there are co-benefits for them, if there are negative impacts for them, and things like that. But also more than citizens, it's integrate a lot of local stakeholders. If you do a thing with citizens, you will also have maybe some supermarket owner coming, some other type of not normal citizens coming that we can integrate in the process. And it helps to really design a tailored solution to your specific context, to your specific values, to your specific concerns. And then it also doing co-creation, it has a big benefit, which is raising awareness and interest. So by doing communication, by doing collaborative, problem solving, you improve the public perception around your system. It's not something that is imposed to them, it's something that they are part of, and it's something that they are aware about. It's something that interests them. So it facilitates the communication, it facilitates the collaboration, and it facilitates the acceptance by the public to do so. So that's for my part, and so thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, or we can discuss after, and you can also send me an emails afterwards, and I will be happy to contact you and share some thoughts.
Thank you very much, Joanna. So very interesting presentation. We are now through with our talk series, and I invite all participants to move and contribute to our final question and answer round. And I saw some of the questions which have been posed have been already answered, but I would like to pick out a few one because I think it's a good way to have a, let's say, a closing panel discussion. And I invite now all speakers of today to activate the camera, activate the microphone. And I would like to start with one very interesting question. Let me just find it again. Here it is. From Fawad, he asked about where can we draw the line, to which extent we should care about it or not. I mean, this is very critical. Of course, we should not be over, let's say, anxious, but also not ignorant. And Jan provided an answer from his point of view, and I would like all speakers to give a short reply on this question of Fawad. Maybe Jan, if you would like to start and just summarize your answer to him.
Yeah, okay, more or less, or I could, or maybe to give another angle of my answer so far. I think on the one hand, I think from our expectations, I mean, I'm as a researcher maybe have another perspective than for sure as a real comparative practitioner, but I would say from our expectations, 100% acceptance is not realistic. So, you know, so it is for me completely normal that there's some, let's say, negative public perception. And I think this is what we want, right? We want regarding public opinions, a kind of diversity. And I think the main point, even you can't convince everybody. And this is for several reasons. Everybody has his or her opinion. And of course, I mean, sometimes a project is really not that well planned. So there's a, you know, legitimate criticism. I think it is important really to step back to the fundamentals, which is clear, transparent information, all the data about the project, that the opinion building process can be done by the public in a fair way, and also that the procedures are fair. So for me, the main target when we look overall the different energy infrastructure projects we accompany is that the acceptance of the process, this is the main point, you know. Well done if it's also acceptance of the project, but everybody, also the opponents, should be at the end say, well, the process was fair. And this is what I tried to express a bit with my answer.
Thank you, Jan. Maybe Maya, if you would like to share your.
Yeah, so I think that's deeply an ethical question primarily. So it's not just where we can say, well, 70% or 65%, but so within this ethical question, I think we should go back to this classical definition of what the public is. So and classically, it's defined by people who are addressed by the consequences, meaning if the consequences of your project are important for people. I mean, nowadays they talk about stakeholders. So the common, so it's not shareholders, it's stakeholders because they have something at stake. But originally the public was meant by if the consequences are grave enough that they affect their lives, that means that they should have a saying in your project. To turn that around, if the counter arguments are about issues that they do not affect people's lives, yes. But if we do know that, now we heard that there could be some legitimate criticism, and the legitimate criticism is if it affects their lives, they should be involved, right? So, or if it affects, but then the lives of their children. So, so that you don't just decide something instead of some other people. As I said, this is very much an ethical question. It's a question of democracy, but the basis of it is if you're going to affect people's lives, especially negatively, they should be very much involved in the decision making. To what extent? It's very difficult to say, but you can't just say we informed people, right? And then we demolished something. So that would be my answer. And it really depends from project to project and on the extent and the greatness of the consequences we're talking about here.
Thank you, Maya. Joanna, would you like to add some views from your point?
I have not much to add because I agree completely with what was just said. Just maybe like making some communication with the public and co-creating with the public is not to change the public perception. Like the goal is not that you're not doing a project and you're just communicating so that they accept the project. You're communicating with them for other reasons, and maybe in the end it will change their perception of the project and make them accept more the project. But the primary goal is not that, because otherwise there is no point. It's just like it's false collaboration. You know?
So that was my point at the beginning, also saying that you really have to start from really shifting the paradigm from PR campaigns where you're just informing and having this perception of people are ignorant versus that you really want to hear what their grievances are, right? What their worries are. You have to listen.
I agree.
And I have a question because, Joanna, as you were just answering the question, it was very interesting to see the examples you were giving from Ottawa, from Helsinki Challenge, from Copenhagen. Who was the first mover? Or from your point of view, what you take with these examples? If you are going to a co-creation, is it the community who needs to do the first step, or is it the other companies? How can we?
That's a complicated question. I think in the cases I've talked about, it was more the municipality doing the first step and asking for the operator, for the private company to engage more with the public. So it was like them having this concern of how you can engage our citizens in the process, and then the company tries to answer. And now, from what I've seen within ENGIE, the companies want to do that, but they don't really know how to, because the public process are so complicated and are so processual that you don't have a lot of margin to really engage. So they don't really know within the boundaries of what is possible, how they can do that. But it's something that's not only from the municipality side, but also from the private company side is starting to become more and more a thing. And I think in district heating in France, actually, the one big problem is that the competitive process has a lot of regulations framing what can be done and what type of communication you can have and who you can communicate to during the process. It's really hard to really engage with people in this process because it's so formalized, and it's formalized from, like, I don't know, 50 years ago. So it's not really up to date, but you can't change it because it's regulation, you know. So municipalities are trying to, operators are now following the process, but we still have these barriers.
Thank you, Joanna. So I see there are some questions also going via the chat. So we can, of course, use the chat, but it's easier to use the Q&A, so your questions will not get lost. So there were two questions which have a more economic background, and I leave it open if anybody of the speakers would like to give a brief reply. First was, Dan asked about the comparison of specific capex. So what are the specific investment costs with geothermal in district heating and cooling? And the second question, which is somehow related to it, in my opinion, is what were the economic benefits in it, which were showed to the public to gain the trust? So is there anybody who would like to give an answer on this, let's say one or both questions which I mentioned just before?
I think the last one goes to Joanna. I think so. This is how I understood it from your three cases.
I was thinking about it actually. I was rereading it too, because I'm not sure like that economic benefits help to gain trust for the project. Like, I'm not sure how trust and economic are related in the different cases. Like, the economic benefits would more be from the cases I've seen at ENGIE on the private company side, because they don't have all the other costs due to barriers due to public perception. Like, because they communicate early, they don't have this other costs, which helps, of course, their economy. And that's why they're investing in trying to formalize processes and how to engage. That's why they are putting money on doing workshops with citizens and stuff like that, because in the end, they will be winner economically. And then for the public to engage, I don't think it's like, you know, normal democratic life. There is a project in your neighborhood and you want to be aware of, and it's not necessarily that you have some economic benefit in going into the communication about the project. It's more you want to know what's happening in your neighborhood, you know. I think it's more this thing that the municipalities are doing, and they're not so much on the economic side. The economic side would be seen more technical for now, like how you can optimize the networks so that you have economies for the final consumer, but not really on the public perception. I'm not sure public is that much aware of this.
Can I jump in a bit?
Yes, please go ahead.
Basically, from research that I saw is primarily one of the arguments is how many new jobs will be done in a specific region. That's a very common economic argument. And one of them that we should be aware of for the future is that preferably more and more people will have a voice in terms of what type of energy they're using. So so when you're paying your electricity bill, that you can choose on which type of energy you can choose. So I think there is really the economic, so where the public can get this economic voice. I think those two arguments are going to be, especially the second one is going to be more and more. And primarily economic also for the district heating and cooling, etc. is how much will we save if we go for this as a community? Again, quite economic argument commonly used.
Yes, maybe to add, I think the economic question and their in its relationship to trust. I think trust is built when, quite easily over time. Again, I think the time dimension is important, and if if it is matching what people say and how they act, how they behave, and also if some expectations are met in the future, which were done in history. And I think this would be then the important thing and regarding the economic benefits, from which expectations, which economical benefits were promised, at the and which point in time, and then over some years, how reality meets really those expectations. And one special thing I think which we do look at in the CROWDTHERMAL project is how people, the crowd, can be directly financially involved. And of course, there are different strategies and different possibilities, but they have different risks connected. And I think this is another point where we meet the relationship to trust between economical benefits. So again, I think the main important is, so as I'm not the expert for the crowdfunding financial questions, but the transparent and reliable information about the different risks, connected to financial options, in order to create realistic expectations. I think this is an important point, and to avoid, let's say, a bad disappointment at the end when your money is gone and you haven't seen the risk before, or have the impression that the risks weren't communicated adequately beforehand. So I think there is a relation, but of course trust is also connected to some other strong points, and not only the economics.
Thank you, Jan. As we are moving in our last minute, and I think we cannot answer all questions which were posed here, I suggest that we end our webinar on this stage. I would like to thank all speakers for the great talks. I think we had also a very good discussion. I would like to thank all participants for joining this webinar, for your interest in this very important topic. I wish you a great afternoon, and please keep in touch with us. We are planning further webinars like this in the future. You can follow us on the CROWDTHERMAL project website and on the website of the EU COST Action CA18219 Research. Thank you and goodbye.